This is my 23.3 work experience evaluation. So during my placement, I shadowed a teacher in each lesson slot, which allowed me to experience many different types of lessons. One activity I did with 2 classes was a multi-activity athletics competition, which involved a shuttle relay, egg and spoon, using a tennis ball and bat, hula hoop run, howler and beanbag race. I did enjoy running this lesson. It was very different to other lessons I helped run because it was focused around fun activities which everyone was able to enjoy because they weren't the usual exercises which would only allow the sporty people to do well in. It was also beneficial for me because I was able to learn how PE teachers deal with large groups of students when they have to combine classes. It was also good because it allowed me to use a load of different ways to score activities involved in throwing and others in speed and running. The skills I learned whilst doing the task would have included learning how to make up a lesson for large groups. I also learned skills in how to make a lesson fun and enjoyable while still getting students to work hard. As well as this, I began to gain confidence in a variety of different scoring methods. I also followed the GCSE PE teacher into one of his lessons when he had made a mini circuit of methods of training, so that's fartlek, interval and plyometric, for all his students to try each of the different stations. I was in charge of the interval training section, so set up a 20-metre sprint which the students had to sprint to and then could obtain a recovery whilst walking back. I really enjoyed this lesson because I was able to use what I knew and offer tips and advice on the students as I had done a similar PEP when I had done my GCSEs and from my previous training. It was also good because they were asking me questions on what the best session to make would be and then actually listening to the answers which I was giving them, I think came from probably maturity of the students. This task was beneficial because it showed me what it was like to teach a more tailored and specific class, one which actually went into a detail of physical education rather than just playing sports. It was also beneficial because it allowed me to have a group of students and work with them on my own, which allowed me to build my confidence. The skills I learned whilst completing this task were how to create and deliver a mini intervals training session. I also found my confidence was being tested because I was working alone with the students, and I found that my explanations were becoming better and more detailed and useful for them to understand. I worked with the Year 10s in a core PE lesson when I set up and officiated a game of rounders. This session was quite short in relation to the other lessons because it was a single lesson, whereas all the other sessions had been double ones to avoid wasting time and allow the students to play as much sport as possible. I did enjoy this lesson quite a bit as I was bowling, so got involved in the game as well as officiating. The kids weren't moaning and put a lot of effort in, which was positive, as it just made the atmosphere more enjoyable. This session wasn't as beneficial as the others because the kids didn't need to be taught any skills and therefore we just played a game of rounders, but I did find as they were playing I was coaching them and building my confidence in that respect. The skills I learned in this lesson was how to make a short session effective and eliminate time wasting. This was handy because it fitted in with my organisational SMART target and therefore allowed me to focus on becoming more organised. I also learned how to manage a team and help them decide make the right decisions. For example, where they should put their fielders and tactical elements of the sport. I also learned how to coach on particular elements of the sport, which helped to increase confidence. Another one of the activities I had to help was one of the PE teachers in the year office he worked in. This is probably the most boring of tasks because it didn't really involve doing much in what I was interested in, and the task was quite dull and repetitive, sorting certificates and filing. I don't think this task was very beneficial in terms of building my skills and knowledge as a PE teacher, but it was beneficial in terms of aiding my organisational skills. It was also useful to talk to the teacher on how he became qualified and how he had become a teacher. I learnt a few organisational skills in this session on efficient ways of filing and ordering certificates. I also learned that I can use another relevant sport degree, not just sport and exercise science, to go to uni and that will still allow me to sufficiently become a PE teacher. Another activity I had to complete during my work experience was officiating and scoring in a game of -5, which is an adapted game for rounders that the school had made up. I enjoyed this because I was given the responsibility of being in charge of a game, again, which I had to officiate and score. I also enjoyed getting the hang of the adapted rules the teachers had made to make the game more interesting and exciting. So instead of just getting an out, you'd lose 5 points for every person who gets out, but you would score a point on every base. This was beneficial to me because I was able to learn how rules of basic games can be adapted in order to make it more exciting and beneficial to the students and to motivate them a bit more. It was also beneficial because, again, it allowed me to work on my confidence and give me another chance to help students with techniques and tactics in their gameplay. I learned how to adapt a game to make it more beneficial to the students because all-inclusive rounders has little incentive to stay in, especially when the innings are timed. I also learned how to score in an efficient way to quickly count it up. I found that I was learning to be more confident enforcing rules and making sure the students were hearing what I was saying. For example, one no was a no ball, making sure I was heard and they were aware that if they chose the one, they would not be able to have another go at batting. For the last lesson of the year for a Year 7 group, I had to set up run a bench ball tournament for a large group. I didn't really enjoy the session. I thought it was set up quite ineffectively, especially with the large amount of students there were and the inside area. I think this session was more beneficial to me because one of the teachers was showing me what the one running it had done wrong. There was about 60 students in the lesson and the leading teacher had split all of them into different teams across the hall before explaining the instructions. And so when she was doing so, the children were talking so much across the hall that it was hard to keep them quiet. It was also pointed out to me that there were 2 teams sitting off each time. This would have been fine had there been a lot of space, but these teams began to walk onto other pitches and disrupt the game. Despite not really enjoying the session, I think I learned some more effective ways of managing larger groups, especially after the teacher had pointed out that if the leader had explained all the rules before starting the teams, it would have allowed the beginning of the lesson to run more smoothly. I also learned that especially when the weather is nice, it is important to give the students a choice of being inside or outside. Lots of the students were moaning at having to be inside when actually the choice was given. They would have been okay to be in the heat and therefore doing something they actually wanted to do, which would have helped the lesson run smoother. In another lesson, I was with teachers who were teaching the beginner shots needed in volleyball. This lesson wasn't too difficult and was the most structured one that I'd helped with. The class was split into separate groups and taught how to perform set shot and the dig. I enjoyed going around the different groups to make sure they were doing it correctly and making progress. I enjoyed umpiring a small-sided volleyball game and explaining the rotations to them after they had scored points. This was beneficial to me because it showed me the methods PE teachers use when teaching basic skills of a game. And this was helpful because across the work experience, this was the only time I was able to see how teachers did this. I think it was also beneficial to me because I was unsure of the rules of volleyball before the lesson, and by helping to teach, it has made me more confident in the rules and skills needed in the game. In this lesson, I was able to gain confidence in officiating the game. This was because I was put in charge of running a match on one pitch. I also learned and got to practice breaking the skill up into parts and then explaining it to a student how they were meant to perform it. I also expanded on my knowledge of volleyball and the certain tactics and skills which were needed in order for it to be performed to a good standard. I helped one of the teachers organise and sort out all her paperwork. I enjoyed this weirdly, mainly because we put music on and I was able to have a relaxed chat with her about how she became a teacher. I think it was beneficial because I learned that there are several different methods you can go through in becoming a teacher and that you can do loads of other things before to make sure it's the right thing for you. It was also beneficial because I learned some of the responsibilities of what teachers had to do with old documents or those with names on, and other useful bits like what is best to keep and what you don't need again. From this, I learned that teachers have to be responsible for any documents with pictures or names on. Anything with them on will need to be shredded or destroyed completely. I also gained some knowledge on how you can become a teacher, which was one of my goals across the work experience. So this is my SWOT analysis of me during the placement. The strengths I think I had when doing the placement was that I showed a lot of knowledge when I was explaining the rules and processes to students. I saw this especially when I was doing interval training with the GCSE group. I also thought one of my strengths was that I helped with everything I was asked to do by the employer and the other teachers who I was helping. This is a strength because it allowed me to try so many different aspects of being a PE teacher and made the placement easier for the employer. I also thought one of my strengths was being enthusiastic because it made the experience more pleasurable for me and those I was working with, and also helped to encourage the students I was working with. A final strength I thought I had was organisation. This was because I had made sure that I was there on time every day and managed to plan in my head and decide what we needed for each lesson, and checking with the teacher I was working with, which would ensure it was all taken out and put back effectively. However, despite this, there were some weaknesses I showed on the placement. I thought I had a lack of confidence when talking to larger groups of students because sometimes they were unable to hear what I was saying or didn't understand what I was getting at, and therefore talking back they may have not done, which if I'd been more assertive. I also felt I was weaker when analysing their skills and performance in lessons. This was because I found it difficult to do when a lot of students were beginners in the sport and I wasn't really sure of the best way to tell them how to do it. I think there were also weaknesses because I was very unsure of how the teachers had gotten to their role, and had, even despite asking them, I still have no clue what would be the best route for me to take if I was going to be a teacher. The opportunities I can take in order to progress into a teaching role include gaining some more work experience at the same school, which would be possible as my employer said he would happily take me back on as a student teacher. I could also take the opportunity in gaining a university degree and then progressing onto the ITET route, which would enable me to gain teaching experience and work to become a teacher. There is also the opportunity to attend a coaching course for specific sports, for example the UKCC Level 1 and Level 2 netball coaching and the EA running leadership coach would be examples of relevant sports I would take based on what I'm interested in. Despite all these opportunities, there are clearly threats to me making progress in this job, the main one being college. This is because I am in my third year, which is a lot of years of education, which could easily lead me to becoming disillusioned with the content and idea of having to continue with my education. Another threat to me becoming a PE teacher is that I would have to obtain money or take out a student loan in order to pay for my education, which I may be unable to do or want to have to pay back. Another threat to this job is personal ambitions I may have. This for me would include working towards being a professional long distance runner, which training and races may interfere with the training processes of becoming a teacher. I may also encounter threats in personal preferences I have and want my career to be. At the moment I have a desire to get into personal training, and if I do so before pursuing becoming a teacher, then it may delay or prevent me from getting the training I may need, or stopping me from wanting to do it. I'm just going to cut here for the next one because I'm near 15.